Hey kids, this is Mark Arm from Mudhoney.
I'm Kevin Martin from Cannabis.
This is Nicole Alvarez from the world famous K-Rock.
Hi, I'm Dave Cruzen.
I am Matt Vaughn from Easy Street Records.
This is Richard Stuverud.
Hey, I'm James Joseph from James and the Cold Gun.
This is Jeremy Toback from the band Brad.
And this is the State of Love and Trust.
State of Love and Trust.
State of Love and Trust.
A Pearl Jam podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Feed that algorithm.
Welcome to another episode of the State of Love and Trust. It's a Pearl Jam podcast. I'm one of your two hosts, Jason Kerepesi, and alongside me, as always, is
Paul Ghiglieri.
Paul. We have a lot to get to this week. Anybody who's watching,
boy, do we ever, Jason.
We're just going to cut through it real quick. Anybody who's watching, let's just get right to the heat of the meat. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. The internet tells me that's how we get more people to know about this beautiful content. So feed that particular algorithm. But if you are audio only, old school listening and not watching, Paul, what should they do?
Well, they should rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Feed that algorithm. Honestly, it's the vote that matters most.
Yes.
It's the vote we need, at least.
Yes. So, cards on the table. We are, as we're recording this, a day away, but really a week away to you, at least, from our presidential election, or really general election. For the interest of those who listen in the future who don't give a damn or, have gotten past that, we're not going to get into it. We had a plan for this episode. Today is the 22nd anniversary of Riot Act, and let's go ahead and do a retro review. Let's retroactively review that record, give our 2 cents, maybe 3 cents because of inflation. Sorry, got a little excited there. I hit the mic. That's a Conan thing to do, to hit the mic. Sorry. I'm channeling my late night host because if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry. So, but listen, reality is here, and it might seep in a little bit to the perspective of this record's review retroactively, as I said. So we got a little bit of the housekeeping out of the way with the old subscribe and algorithm whatnots. If you would be so kind, please be so kind as to go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen right now and donate some money over to our November nonprofit organization. That is the Wounded Warrior Project. November 11th, which just passed us a couple days ago or yesterday,
That's right.
is Veterans Day, and we honor our veterans. We should be honoring our veterans all the time. This month, we are trying to put a little spotlight on it, so if you could go ahead and throw a few bucks over there, that would be super. $5 or more, Paul, they get stickers and pins from us.
They sure
These
do.
bad boys. And to up the ante, if they are the biggest donator this month to Wounded Warrior Project,
what do they get?
This
Jason?
bad boy.
Oh,
right here.
What a beaut. What a beaut.
Brad Kloss's new book.
Right here
Where's
on the
yours?
shelf. That's right here on the shelf.
Okay, cool. Well, this bad boy could be yours. I got the copy sitting right on the floor over there. This one's mine, so you can't have it. But the biggest donator will get that book for the price of On the House. Well, actually, it isn't the price of On the House. It's the price of your donation. But, it's a good cost. Otherwise, go ahead and go to our Instagram bio and tap on that link and donate a few bucks. We would appreciate it if you want to support the show.
No doubt.
Patreon is the way to go. Throw a few bucks over there. A lot of extra content. Discord is great. And honestly, that's how we are able to support this content and keep the show on the air. So we appreciate all those who are patrons. If you are new, thank you very much. And to up the ante for anybody who's thinking about joining, every month is a giveaway. This month, no exception. Boom.
What do we got? Oh, what you
This
looking
guy
at.
right here.
I am no guide. We sure need one these days. But that book is a requisite reading companion if you are a Pearl Jam fan. It's a must-have.
I just opened to the Yield chapter. It's a lovely book. I've actually read some of it. We both read a little bit of it a while back, and you may see a forward by people that you recognize. Wink. So anyways, if you're a patron, that could be yours. That's the giveaway of the month, and that is all for the housekeeping. I mentioned it a moment ago. It is the 22nd anniversary of Riot Act. that record came out at a very dubious time in the American landscape.
Jason, is this discussion not just apropos for both today and evergreen in the future?
That's why we are going to do this retro review the way that we are going to do it. And if you were here a couple months back, we did our first retro review of 10.
Yes,
I'm going to link to it up in the corner for those YouTubers. So you can click on that and go to it in a little bit. But we had a great time. And it was kind of like this cool, we didn't even really plan it too much, where it was kind of like your play-by-play commentary and your color commentary if you're watching a sporting event. I gave you the play-by-play and Paul gave you the perspective. And I think it worked pretty damn well. So we're going to try that one more time with Riot Act. Paul, one of our patrons is a really big Riot Act fan and says it's his favorite. So I'm curious to see what he thinks about this.
It sounds like we have... We're going to have a tough critic on our hands.
Now, I am ready.
Have it any other way.
I am ready with my Lagavulin this evening, Paul. Are you
okay.
with... Oh, that is a home pour of wine. Holy Moses. Oh, we are ready. So, that's it. There's nothing else to say, but let's dive into Riot Act 22 years later. Do you have any opening comments? I mean, we have 15 tracks to get through and I'm sure an epilogue. So if not, we can just dive in.
I mean, I do have some macro thoughts, but I think those are probably better served for the end of this discussion.
All right, sir.
I think so.
Fair enough. So let's dive in with our first track, Cant Keep. So, before the music even starts, there's a bit of atmosphere in the room, like someone's humming. So already this record feels very organic to me. It's almost playful, which is an interesting juxtaposition considering that it's not a very playful record. Now,
far from it.
Yeah. Matt's drums, they start out, they amble in and lurch forward. You got Stone's guitar, which is transposed from Adzuk on the demo. That is in fact playful sounding. And you got Mike kind of complimenting that. I think it's playful sounding.
It is an art rock record. So I guess in some ways, art is meant to be playful and fun in some respects.
Yeah, and I think against the backdrop of what this record's going to offer, I find that to be interesting. I think that Jeff is very understated in his playing. I think he keeps us grounded while the guitars, for me, sound like they're kind of floating a little bit. And some really fun, affected guitar fills from Mike here throughout. That's kind of his thing. It keeps the song feeling like a hot air balloon searching for the skies to explore. But it can't quite. And I think that's because of a very specific word that Ed sings multiple times across the song. And that word, Paul, is want. Here's a few examples. I want to shake. I want to wind out. I want to leave. I want to race. I want to rise and say goodnight. I want to take a look on the other side. Take that with the refrain, you can't keep me here. There's a sense that while Ed is sick of the place he's in, there's something holding him back. When we yearn, we're implying that right now, we're not able to do what we want to do. There is no I am in this song, right? And so there's this dream.
But there will be on another song.
True, and we'll get and thank God it's there. There is this desire to ascend, to leave a bad place behind. But someone, some people, some concept, some relationship is holding Ed or the subject back. What is it? Well, we're gonna have to listen to find out. I think it's a very solid song that, like a lot of this record, has aged well over time. It may not have scored high for me 22 years ago, but it scores pretty high for me now. I give it a 3.5 out of 5.
3.5 out of 5. That's
yes,
solid.
Sir. Yes, I think it's a very solid number. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm at a 3. I think, we hear this song on Eddie's Uke album. Mm-hmm. So, while far from what I would call an essential track, I think it does offer a sense of agency, a sense of urgency, both sonically and lyrically, that really seems to kind of like capture the frustration, the despair, the restlessness, the unwillingness to relent that I think Eddie was feeling at that time. I think a lot of people were feeling post 9/11, and quite frankly, what many folks on one side wrestled with when they woke up this morning. it's a different context from a different time, but perhaps not so dissimilar. This is a song that I think works better on this record than it does as a solo uke venture, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I think that the band doesn't just add color to the track. I think the band ultimately helps the track realize its ambitions in the long run. So I would say for those reasons, it really does set the tone for the rest of the record. And I think it helps anchor in a lot of ways so much of what the rest of the record will be about, as far as those themes, like I said, of frustration, restlessness, unwillingness to relent, and kind of the dichotomy of those two things existing within us at the same time. So 3 out of 5 for me as well.
Okay, so we're pretty damn close, and I like that you use the word anchor there, because that's exactly what I felt, right? Like I felt like that part of the song wanted to soar, but there was something keeping it down, and that's we're gonna see a lot of that, I think, across this record. So let's move on to track 2, and that's "Save You." So people often complain that bands play their songs faster in concert than on the album, and that does the song a disservice. A prime example in the Pearl Jam community is Even Flow, and while not played as fast as some claim it to be, I'm looking at you, I know who you are, the band does play a little bit faster than on the record. It doesn't bother me personally, but I understand. For me though, a song like "Save You," it actually benefits from a higher tempo live. In isolation, the main riff is very fun, but it needs that extra oomph from the live experience. And when I first heard this track in 2002, I really liked it. It felt like something that I was expecting from this band, and not the slower tempoed first single, "I Am Mine." But it's funny how time affects your tastes, right? The best things musically about this song for me are the inclusion of Boom's organ halfway through the verse and Jeff's bass line. Ooh, baby, Jeff's bass line. He has this little note bend thing in the main riff. It's like a slingshot. And then in the interlude, you know Ed's going to come back in when Jeff switches up how he ends that riff, because he's going really high and then he goes back down low. When they play this thing live, he usually extends that pretty far, and you know they're going to come back in with Ed when he goes back low. I like that. Lyrically, I am a bit torn in this one. I really love the theme of saving a good friend who's having a rough go of it, someone who is maybe committing self-harm, but there are some lines that feel a bit too obvious or on the nose for me, and some lines are too important to me, too important to us, we'd be lost without you. Okay, obviously. Maybe I'm just used to more imagery, more poetry from Ed. It's almost like when a singer's big moment is, "I love you, I miss you, you're my girl." Like we did that stuff in the 50s. Like we've moved beyond that for me, right? Give me something else. And yet, it's actually the choruses with the F-bombs that actually do it for me. Like I don't find them to be crass. I find them to be exhausted and frustrated. Like they're the exclamation point of not being able to find the words anymore to prove to that person that you care. And we've all been there. Specifically, I like these words. And fuck me if I say something you don't want to hear, and fuck me if you only hear the treble in your head. I love that particular line. That exasperation paired with that metaphor is awesome. I've always loved it, and I've always loved this one too. "Let's pick up your will. It's grown fat and lazy. I'm sympathetic as well. Don't go on me now." That's the kind of writing that I love from Ed. If only there were more of it in this song, because the idea, its theme is so great. And I think we could all use a friend like Ed in this song. And how poignant would it be years later? I think it's a really good song, but it's faded for me. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5.
Okay. I think it has grown on me.
Interesting.
I think when I first heard this record, it was a 2 out of 5 for me.
I
found it to be wholly unremarkable. Just had that dirty kind of garage rock sounding, habit sounding feel to it. But
I can see that.
That doesn't mean that the song hasn't aged well for me, which is interesting because it did the opposite for you. But could this song be an anthem for many people today, as well as it was perhaps for Eddie in 2002? The inability to break through, the anger, that frustration, the dissent that you were talking about. Sonically, this 2-step opening, it almost feels like it's from the No Code playbook, right? When you look at Cant Keep as kind of a sister song to a song like Sometimes, and you have a song like this as a sister song to a song like Hail Hail. Both those songs and both those openings feel similar. And
it's a sequencing playbook they're pulling from.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. Before the eclectic world beats that we might come to expect from Jack Irons are instead replaced with Boom and Eddie singing about the power of love. And I will say, much like then, love remains the guiding light that many will need even today, especially if you perceive the current state of the country as darker than it's ever been. Yeah. So I'm going to go with a 3 on this one here.
Okay. We are in lockstep, but it's funny how we came there from different plateaus. That's very interesting. Curious to what you guys think about that. We're going to move on to track 3, Love Boat Captain.
Is this just another day? This God-forgotten place?
I kind of poo-pooed obvious lyrics when it came to Save You, so I have to be consistent and say that I've never really loved Ed quoting the Beatles so blatantly with that line, it's already been sung, but it can't be said enough, all you need is love. It always came off as a bit lazy. However, if you're gonna quote someone, it might as well be John freaking Lennon. So there's that. And that's kind of where my criticisms of this song end. I mean, you've got the organ opening up by Boom. It sets the table. And then when Ed's guitar kind of fades in, it's almost like we've found a heartbeat. That lovely strumming that I love that. When the rest of the band comes in, it's a force. Not like a go or an even flow or something like that. It's an emotive force. And I think the shackles keeping Cant Keep down are actually smashed when this happens. The second verse, lyrically, for me, is a masterpiece. I love this. Hold me and make it the truth that when all is lost, there'll be you. Because to the universe, I don't mean a thing. And there's just one word I still believe, and it's love. The context of head and heart here. Ed is aware of our insignificance to the greater powers, to the universe. And yet, Ed can be at peace with that if he's just got that person to hold on to, that person to love. That is powerful with a capital P. And I'm quoting Stipp when I say that. From an arrangement standpoint, this song is not paint by numbers. It does not follow a typical pop song format, and that dynamically is very welcome, especially on the heels of Save You. And there's another verse I have to mention real quick. It's an art to live with pain, mix the light into gray. Lost 9 friends will never know 2 years ago today, and if our lives become too long, would it add to our regret? Ed doesn't stay on the surface level. He dives even deeper than he did with the metaphysical commentary in the second verse. It's a warning shot across the bow of the Love Boat for young people too. And the young, they can lose hope because they can't see beyond today. The wisdom that the old can't give away, constant recoil, sometimes life don't leave you alone. We have talked about Pearl Jam's ability to add perspective to topics that have been a thematic baseline across many, many songs. That's what makes each song different and compelling, and they've done it again here. This song is a force and becomes a hymn in the Church of Pearl Jam whenever it's played live. This is, it's very close to the best song on the record for me. It's a 4.5.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was distinctly disappointed, I think, when I first heard this song come out. I don't think I was ready for it. I think that I, like you, kind of found the Beatles reference to it. It fell as flat at the time as, the Michael Jackson Ben reference on Rats and Verses, which I've come to appreciate more over the years. What I will say about this song, though, is that this song to me, Love Boat Captain, this is the embodiment of simple sincerity. And boy, is that ever in short supply these days. I would say that existential theme that you kind of touched upon, this idea of being a small, insignificant part of the universe, and that love essentially is really the only thing that provides direction. That is the vessel by which that we can wade into these uncharted waters. I think that's an important idea. There's a signal there. It's an important message. And more than anything else, though, I think it highlights just how important love is within the greater context of the fact that we could be experiencing something that feels so big and so heavy, and yet at the same time recognize and acknowledge that we very much are and may be a very tiny sliver of insignificance in the grand scope of the greater universe. And so how can we be so insignificant and simultaneously feel so deeply at the same time? And I think love essentially is the variable that allows that to happen. So I think Love Boat Captain does a beautiful job, both lyrically and sonically, of bringing those ideas together. So for me, I put it in the same bucket as the other two songs. I gave it a 3. I don't think it ever quite reaches the heights that its ambitions suggest that it wanted to. So it's not fully realized for me in that way. But at the same time, I think it's a tremendous sonic and lyrical composition. It's a great achievement on a lot of levels. And it's just a wonderful introduction to Boom in so many ways as well.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Love Boat Captain. Let's move on to track 4, and that is Crop Duster.
Black green to green, dark green brown, every life is falling down.
Talk about a song that doesn't follow your usual arrangement. It's quickly obvious that this is a Matt song. You got the stumbling yet never falling apart groove with the guitars picking kind of around the beat, like someone trying to not step on fallen twigs walking through the forest, very dainty. But check this out. From the first verse to the second, the guitars are actually completely different, which I thought was really interesting. Like, why repeat what we already did? It's very jazzy of them. The picking guitars are actually replaced by Stone's upstroked chords. He plays them on the ands of the beat. Fans of ska will know what that move is all about. And maybe the biggest curveball is actually how the chorus is completely changed key. I like that they got weird here, because weird can be interesting, but it's also not really been in their DNA. So at the time, the song really stuck out to me. I'm not sure that being this far outside the box is their strongest suit, though. However, it does lead us into one of my favorite parts of the entire album, the bridge. Mike and Stone just beating those eighth note chords while Jeff is slithering around them. We can feel something building, and it finally gives way to an outro that, at first, feels like we're staggering up a hill, searching for the pinnacle. And finally, Matt's drum fill brings us over to the other side, and we get this ascending guitar pattern that feels like it's compelling Ed to take the governor off. And lyrically, I'm just a bit surprised this isn't a Jeff song, because Ed really goes down some poetic rabbit holes that I'm still trying to decipher to this day. But fortunately, there are lines. Yeah, there are. There are lines like these coming up here that hit me exactly where I need to be hit. Everyone is practicing, but this world's an accident. I was the fool because I thought the world. Turns out the world thought me. It's all the other way around. We're upside down. To be humbled by nature and to be okay with it. I love that. I think we need more of it. And maybe I'm just in the part of my life now where I appreciate humility more than I did when I was 20, when this song came out, full of gumption. But those lyrics right there and the outro elevate a song that for me was maybe a little too uneven. So I like the song. I wish that I loved it. It could be there, but it's not quite. So it's a 3 for me.
Interesting. I do love it. I think it is there. This is the art punk rock record.
Interesting.
This is the art punk rock record emerging finally with this song.
Okay.
But with all of its existential questions, none of which get answered. Then, by the way, all of which remain today.
I'm going to say the exact same thing later on, by the way. A different song.
Eddie once said that this song is about a man's giant ego, and that he's the most important thing on the planet. I would wager that we can probably think of a few public figures who profile this way today. So again, I keep hearkening back to this idea that Riot Act, both thematically and sonically and tonally, seem to be a fitting record for right now. And it was very much fitting within the context in which it was written post 9/11. And I think all of those ideas kind of come together with those existential questions on Crop Duster, because again, it's this idea that I thought the world thought me. You just go back to that pinnacle of questioning the very fabric of who you are, what you stand for, and whether or not you are really what matters, and if your position and your point of view is actually something that should shift things on its axis, like, or is the seismic shift really represented by the rest of the world and its perception of you? Because ultimately, or perhaps the real answer, I don't know, is all of those things working in concert to lead to an eventual outcome. But I think Crop Duster kind of posits these questions without necessarily supplying an answer. And I think that's the important part of the song. Sonically speaking, I mean, as a composition, I've always enjoyed it. I find it to be, it's catchy. I think that it is a balance to it that I didn't find on Love Boat Captain and some of these other songs.
I find that fascinating.
I did, yeah. I think maybe it's just because the guitars grab me more. And so I think I'm more invested in kind of seeing where the song goes, and I'm more willing to go on the ride that it takes me, or the flight that it takes me.
It's a bit more unique than Love Boat Captain, for sure.
It is for sure. I think so too. But it doesn't meander in bizarre places like some songs in the catalog, or so I felt. And it simultaneously doesn't necessarily possess these very bizarre signatures and timings that we see with a lot of Matt songs either. So I think it works well. I'm going to go 3.5 here.
All right. Interesting. Well, let's move on to track 5 in Ghost.
Mind is gray like the sea, blackening and overgrown.
Groovy. That's the first adjective that comes to mind for this song. Mid-tempo, power chords, not many of them. It's a really simple palette for Ed to paint on. And I think that's where the song finds most of its character. But more on that in a minute. We both mentioned how much we loved the picking guitar thing in the pre-chorus of React Respond, right? And we also both really love the tremolo effect on Stone's guitar during the verses of Dark Matter. If you combine those ideas, you've got Stone's chorus contributions here on Ghost. And that is very cool. It's probably the coolest part of the song musically, alongside Mike's octave fuzz solo that follows that first chorus. I want to quickly mention how I think most of us either forgot or never really noticed, and maybe it's the mix, what Matt is doing in this song, because it's fantastic. While the majority of the guitars and bass are pretty simple, there's a key to that. That allows Matt to get weird and throw in like these weird funky fills that feel like they're kind of like they're trying to unravel the groove, but they don't. They, of course, never do, but they're the spice that gives this song, which musically isn't incredibly profound, a bit of flair. The real flair, though, as alluded to, Ed's lyrics. It's a depressing yet poetic way to look at the state of the world. Now, here's some lines that have stood out to me. Love is deep, dig it out, standing in a hole alone, working for something that we can never hold, a place in the clouds. And these two. The TV, she talks to me, breaking news and building walls, selling us what I don't need, didn't know soap made you taller. And so I'm flying away, driving away, passing old friends I don't miss at all. This sad acceptance that the world is crumbling, that it's divided, that we've chosen to let it be divided, manipulated, exploited, etc., etc. And while it's happening, feeling alone. There is a profound sadness to this song that not even 3 Mike McCready solos can fix, and that's saying something. It's a powerful song, even if musically it's a little less than spectacular. But I think it's important, and it's a 3.5.
3.5. Okay.
What do you got for me? Because there's a lot of meat in that bone.
There is a lot of meat on that bone. When I think about this song, I can't help but think about what you just said. This idea of, crumbling and fractured and being alone and all of the despair that comes with that. And I think that Pearl Jam in America were both plunging into uncharted waters in 2002. Again, not very much unlike today, where a lot of people feel like the world is crumbling, or a lot of people, or vice versa, a lot of people feel like the world is realigning. A lot of people feel as though they're alone. But more importantly than that, this does feel uncharted on so many levels, both today and at the time, post 9/11 as well. The band worked actively at that time to control their public image leading up to that point. Perhaps as a response to the blazing success of 10, which kind of left all of them more than a little bit singed, I would argue. So I think of a song like React Respond. Eddie sings on React Respond that we should not react, but rather respond. However, Riot Act, which was recorded 20 years prior to that song, it very much feels like a reaction that ultimately provides a glimpse into this band without the filters of the band-controlled narratives. It's raw like this song. It's ambitious like this song. And I think it's really willing to kind of bravely chart a course through those uncharted waters without really knowing how it's going to be received or even what's going to come next. So that the concept of Ghost and the record as a whole is really reactionary on a lot of levels. And it's far less of a designed vision, I think, than any other album in the catalog since or before it. So when I think of a song like Ghost, it's got these crunching guitars. This is Jeff's song, so there's an abstract nature to it. That line, "My memories, they eat me. I've seen it all before. Bring it on, because I'm no victim." This song is in many ways, to quote a lyric from it, is in many ways about finding hope. And it's hope that you've missed along the way. And you've kind of become a ghost hiding away, and you're numb to the point of saying that it doesn't really hurt when you bleed anymore. And I think that over the last 10 years, at various points, people have said they felt that way, whether it's because of what happened in 2016, or whether it's because of what happened with COVID in 2020, or whether it's because of what happened in 2021 or 2024. I think we're at a point where we are fractured, and we allowed all of these things to happen. You know what I mean? We allowed everything that has transpired in the last 10 years to happen. And we look no further than inward in order to figure out how we got to the places that we've been. And so a song like Ghost really seems to articulate that feeling pretty well, I think. So for me, I think it's an underrated song. I'm going with a 3.5 on this one as well.
All right. Yeah, it's interesting because this album is generally not regarded as top of the pops, can I say?
Got some great solos too, this song.
Yeah, but there are moments that when you go back, you're like, I like that more than I thought I did. And it almost makes you question where you're at. And it's tough because then you compare it to a song that you love, and it's like, okay, but it's not that. But man, is it still really good? That's just how strong the catalog is, boys and girls. Let's move on, though. Let's move on to the next track, and that is the first single, I Am Mine. We've spoken about the sea shanty aspect to the music Ed wrote for this one before. I will say I did not really care for it for a long time. It just didn't feel like Pearl Jam to me. And while I don't dislike it now, it does still feel a little out of place musically in the catalog. But here's the rub. Though. The chorus melody and the theme, the lyrics, absolutely make up for it. I will say, before we get to the praise, they're not all gems. This one line always gets me. The ocean is full because everyone's crying. All right, take off your black eyeliner, Ed. Relax. but then you have amazing lines like these that make up for it. The sorrow grows bigger when the sorrow is denied. I only know my mind. I am mine. Oh, fantastic. So when times are tough, we have to remind ourselves that our lives are still ours to live.
Yeah.
The outside world can only dictate which paths are available to us so much. At this point in the record, this reminder is really needed because considering the climate in which the album was written and in which the one that we're living in right now, perspective is the light that will keep us found. We all have agency and free will. That in and of itself is a win. What we do with that is up to us. So I guess in the dark times, we have to go back to ground zero of positivity and remind ourselves that at the very least, we have ourselves. You've got to start somewhere. And maybe Mike's outro solo can be the hand to help you up off of the mat of despair. For me, another song that I like a lot, I don't love it, but I like it a lot. I gave it a 4, strong 4.
Yeah, this one to me, I think really, it gets us as close to an answer to some of these existential questions as we're going to get.
Yep.
It's now more than ever, folks realize the importance on focusing on what they can control rather than what they cannot control. And I think that was true back in 2002 as well. With America at war in Afghanistan, trying to figure out what is the appropriate response rather than reaction to 9/11 and the events that preceded it. So on so many levels, I think it can be perceived as a concession, a song that's about conceding and saying, well, all I can control is me, and I am mine, and I know that I'm born and I know that I'll die, but the in-between is mine. That's true. But at the same time, I think that the Eddie of today would probably argue that there is more than that we can control, But at the same time, it might be that there's nothing more important than that you can control, because ultimately, this body, this vessel in which you inhabit, this is the greatest gift that you'll ever have: the ability to feel, to live, to love, to fear. In some respects, which in turn helps you appreciate the life that you've been given. Obviously, if you give into too much of any of these types of things, they can be corrupting influences. But more so than that, it's important to kind of understand that there's a singular identity, and that stems from an understanding that you are your own person, and therefore, you need to make choices that are representative of your beliefs and are representative of what you believe is the right thing to do, not falling into that herd mentality. And at the end of the day, you will die, as we all will. And that in between was ultimately the only thing that was truly yours. The context of all the other surrounding events of 2002 and the context of all the surrounding events of 2024 are not within your control, and they're not things that you ultimately get to keep. They're not yours. That's a shared reality. But your life, who you are, your feelings, that is yours. So I think that this song does a solid job of driving that point home, and I would say that it's deserving of one of the elite single or one of the better songs on the album. So I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5 too.
All right. Very good. Let's move on to Thumbing My Way. This song always feels connected both thematically and musically to Off He Goes to me. And that's a good thing. It's rustic, it's blemished, organic, real. And I like when Pearl Jam does this, and I think it really suits the band. In this song, no one is flashy. Everyone is understated. And again, it's a song that I was not searching for at 20 years old, much like I wasn't searching for Around the Bend either, right? And yet, now I can see its value and its wisdom. Lyrically, the metaphors and the colorful imagery are near peak Ed. And some of my favorites are these. I let go of a rope, thinking that's what held me back, and in time I've realized it's now wrapped around my neck. All the rusted signs we ignore throughout our lives, choosing the shiny ones instead. There's no wrong or right, but I'm sure there's good and bad. The questions linger overhead. And finally, and maybe most apropos of where we are right now, no matter how cold the winter, there is a springtime ahead. We make mistakes in our lives. Sometimes we're the collateral damage of others' mistakes. The key is to keep going, to not let despair beat you. We have to acknowledge and accept the valleys, to even recognize that there are paths to ascend the mountains. It's a truly lovely song. It's not elite, but it's very good. It's a 4 for me.
Nice. This song is about hitchhiking your way through a broken heart, according to Vedder. And the live version from Japan in 2003, I think, might be the best expression of this song. That muted organ with the brush drums, that folksy guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's arguably one of the most successful, quieter moments in the entire catalog, let alone this album. I think it's interesting what you just said, this idea of we make mistakes and, these shiny things that we bought into are suddenly become that rope around our neck. Depending on who you are, what you want to believe, whether you were somebody that said going to war in Afghanistan was the right response, or somebody who said, no, it's not. I think that history will determine at that time for you whether or not you come to find that position and the investment in that approach became the rope around your neck. And I think the same could be true of 2024 or even 2020, depending on what stance you had and what position you had in either of those given elections. So ultimately, I think this song serves as a kind of like a warning, if you will.
Interesting.
Kind of a folksy, metaphorical warning that ultimately, when we chase the wrong things, mistakes are going to be made. But that doesn't mean that hope is lost. And I think ultimately it's that it circles around back to that idea that there is there is a springtime ahead if you're willing to look for that, and you can endure that rope around your neck, so to speak. Which, obviously it's a morbid analogy, but that's the one that he gave us. So,
but to some, it feels that way. And the point of, if you're willing to put in the hard work of hitchhiking back to where you need to be to start over again. I'm looking at some people who have some decisions to make about the next 4 years. You got to do it. You got to,
you do. Or
bootstraps
conversely, people who made those decisions and may come to realize in short order that those decisions didn't necessarily yield the returns that they thought
right.
that they would. I don't know. So I think it can go in a lot of different ways here, but I think it's an apropos and a timely song for today, just as much as it was in 2002, 3.5 out of 5 for me.
And how perfect is it that once again, Ed is able to use a what seems to be an obvious relationship song to anything else that needs it.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. All right, moving on to a fabulous song, You Are. If I was tepid or unsure about the unique musicality of Crop Duster, I was pleasantly surprised by it on You Are. Matt, you beautiful genius. As many of you know, he used a drum machine to create that choppy, digital tremolo sounding main riff. Now, the key for me is not leaning into it with both guitars, though. That would feel like overkill. So what they've done is on the left, Stone is playing a variation of the riff without any effect. I should point out, though, that when they play this live, the roles are reversed, and Stone plays the drum machine riff, Mike plays the not drum machine riff. Anyways, what that does is it creates a wet-dry effect. All of my guitar players out there will know what that means. It basically creates a stereo effect because they're different things. It's a much wider, more rich sound, and it's very pleasing. And in Matt's lurching groove, man, you had them all together, babe. You got a stew going. Meanwhile, the lyrics that Matt and Ed have put together in this thing are just fantastic. Here's the first verse. This broken wheel is coming undone and the road's exploding, but you're keeping me strong, rolling along with you. This reminds me of those famous lines in Leash. I'm lost, I'm no guy, but I'm by your side. We may be flawed, both, or breaking up, maybe at different times in our lives, but our love is what keeps us moving together regardless. This song is the love letter I didn't know that I needed. And I think very few songs in the catalog achieve 5-star status as flawless compositions. And this is not one of them. Ooh, baby, but is it close? Is it close? I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Nice. Solid. It's my favorite song on the record. And it has been from the very get-go. This matte vehicle, Eddie and the band just elevates to a higher level. Love is a tower, and you are the key. That drum machine, like you just said, it creates that rhythmic envelope, or those rhythmic envelopes, I should say, that really like trigger the opening and closing of the guitar outputs. It was originally called Undone. It was undone before undone, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just a stellar composition, and it's beautifully executed. It's a 4 for me. It was a 4 for me then, and it continues to maintain its elevated status for me. So that's what happens when the band comes together around something and they're able to push it to the next level. And it was just great because, he brought something really unique and different to them, and they were able to work together. And I think that you see shades of that happening throughout later records. But this might be one of the better articulations of it. So.
And I forget which episode we did this on, but I think we both talked about how, can you imagine if this was the lead single off of Riot Act? I think a different perspective of this album. But
perhaps so, yeah. There are some folks that aren't as big of a fan of it as we are.
They're crazy. I kid. Who doesn't like New R? Has anybody ever told you that? I don't know anybody like that.
I've had a few people say that it was just right. It wasn't an overly remarkable song. But.
Well, nuts to them. We're going to move on to Get Right.
I want for to lay down. I'm waiting till sundown.
I am going to admit something here that maybe carves away some of my credibility. I still have no idea what this song is really about.
Is it about sex? Is it about drugs?
Smoking weed?
Is it about smoking weed? I mean,
I don't. You know what? Does it hurt Get Right score? Yes. However, goddamn, if this music isn't incredibly fun. I mean, the main riff is basically Mike playing the same harmonic over and over again. You got Stone kind of playing off of it. Jeff is basically doing a 3-minute bass solo, but yet it also feels like it's part of the groove at the same time, which is brilliant. Jeff's groove is kind of like a shadow melody during the verses. Such a cool and unique feature. Yeah. You've got a gang clap in the chorus. What? We hadn't heard a gang sing along until Running, but we got a gang clap along in this song. And then once Mike Solo rips into the delay heavy madness, Matt's got this choppy, like drunken groove, but then it builds into a straight ahead rock thing that kind of refuses to let you sit there without bobbing your head because it's so goddamn fun. And then in between the last 2 chorus repetitions, Matt brings in the cowbell, bring in the cow. I mean, what a great 2 minutes and 39 seconds. If only the lyrics matched the good time we were having musically, it'd be a higher rated song for me, but it's a good 3. It's a good 3 for me.
All right. That's fair.
What do you got?
Look, nearly every song on this record has an element of inaccessibility to it. And I think that seems to reflect how inaccessible America was to the band at the time. And quite frankly, I wonder if it's all that different than how inaccessible America feels to many people today. It's a solemn record, and this is a solemn song in its own right, despite its fun sonic sound. But it's a solemn song and record, I think, trying to wade through that sea of fear and paranoia and toxic feelings that really have morphed into something much uglier over the last 20 years. People really trying to get right with each other and not really knowing how to do that. Change was the ticket this time around, and people were offered hope from one candidate, ironically. And I say ironically because it's usually not the incumbent that's selling hope. because it's like the last 4 years were with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I might sell you hope if the last 4 years were with somebody else, and it's like, hey, look, this person drove us into the ground, and so I'm selling you the hope of a better tomorrow. And
Perspective
I think
is a son of a bitch, Paul.
it is, but people responded to that idea of hope because that was a bit of a referendum on the last 4 years, if you will, for some, not saying all, and they want to change. But I don't think it was necessarily that idea that the reason people are responding to hope is because they want change. I don't know if that was fully embraced. Economic concerns obviously have reigned supreme, and people can't get right with that. The pitch was, let's turn the page on the Trump era, but really the only era folks could relate to right now is the era of inflation. There were 10 abortion referendums, only 2 of which failed. So red states were passing referenda, and I think the concern for perhaps some women voters was that they could let up a little bit, that maybe this fear of a national abortion ban with that let up, and the fact that you had one candidate saying that he would veto a bill that tries to do that. Now, whether or not you want to believe that or not is
another story.
That's you getting right with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but people didn't care about character either. People had to get right with character or lack thereof, I would say. Some might say that the Democratic Party, they can't reach its working class base.
I was just going to say, they need to get right with them.
Right. They got to get right with them, right? There might be a level of, I don't know, cultural and economic arrogance maybe, combined with a little bit of shunning of dissenters that has increasingly antagonized the really fast-growing voting bloc. That's telling when a party loses the presidency in both houses of Congress. Others, flip side, might argue that people kind of overlooked misogyny, bigotry, racism, xenophobia, compulsive lying, corruption for the sake of a perceived economic win.
How long is this grocery list?
You've got to get right with that then, right? So,
yeah.
I think that's a lot of people. And then there's another segment that would say, you know what? There's a lot of people that just want to be awful, and this guy gives them permission to be that. Or ignorance is bliss. Maybe you got to get right with that.
And how much of this is mirrored to 22 years ago?
Yeah, I don't know.
Not necessarily to the same degree, or some might argue otherwise, but there's a lot of parallels, and I can see why they would write a song like this for that feeling. That unfortunately
we were at war,
similar.
And we were trying to find a way to get right. And here we are 22 years later. And I think regardless of whether, hey, we won and it's time to realign, or man, I feel like we lost and we need to get right. We all share that sentiment of it's time to get right. So here we go.
What was your score on this one?
I'm going to go 3.
Okay. In alignment.
I feel like I'm in alignment with you.
Cool. All right. Let's move on. Next track is Green Disease. Sometimes you really want to be on the nose because a message is so vital that there's no time for too many cheeky metaphors. Well, welcome to Green Disease and its punk attitude. This is, I will say, a clinic in kick drum work. And I have to believe that Matt's right calf was pretty tired after tracking this bad boy. I mean, that's 1 foot. That's not double bass pedal. That's 1 foot. The only other musical comment of note for me on this song is Jeff's bass. For me, it is the classic punk bass sound. Raw, it's aggressive. That's what I want to hear on this kind of song. However, the rest of the music falls a bit flat for me. Maybe the amps don't have enough gain. They don't seem to match the energy and immediacy of Jeff's bass or Matt's drums. I will also add that I don't think Ed's delivery matches the intensity of his vitriol. He's got some sharp things to say, but as is much the case across Riot Act, he almost comes off as too despondent to give the appropriate level of gusto. And there are some really clever lines articulating his criticisms of greed. This one right here is, and like weeds with big leaves, stealing light from what lies beneath. Where they have more, still they take more. And these two. There's nothing wrong with what you say, but don't sell me there can't be better ways. Tell the captain the boat's not safe and we're drowning. Turns out he's the one making waves. Again, I think they were trying to make a statement. And while I agree with their premise, they're also preaching to the choir. And I don't believe the performance in totality would convince enough of those outside the church of their message. So for me, it's an average song, 2.5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it might go down as the defining theme of 2002 America in a lot of ways.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, but, some might argue that folks who prioritize the price of eggs over women's reproductive rights today are suffering from the same ailment, just in a different way. I don't know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, look, you get a sound that's more reminiscent of the Strokes back in 2002 than the Ramones here, which I think was a very different take for Pearl Jam. After all, their previous records kind of eschewed the adjacent sounds of the day, or those days, in favor of those classical influences of their past. So I thought this was, at the time, a very modern spin for Pearl Jam in terms of what their compositions could sound like. And I thought that was unique in the sense that I felt like I was hearing sounds of today's music, or the music of the day, kind of bleeding into their music. And I thought that was interesting that, you don't normally see that in their music very often. So thematically, I don't think much has changed. I still think that this country suffers from a green disease and always has. And I would argue that, it's just as relevant. So 3.5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah. Your point about, the theme being ever present. I mean, I wonder if I just kind of ignored that because it's so constant that it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Boring, yeah. We're just fatigued
you're not taking a stand by calling out greed. Like, duh.
I know.
And that's the sad thing.
Right.
Why am I laughing? Who the hell knows? Let's move on. The next song is Help Help. When James Hetfield was asked to look back on the Load and Reload albums, he criticized himself for not being judicious enough with what they were creating. To that point, every song they had written prior had made the album. There was no fat on the previous Metallica records. So naturally, their egos persuaded them to, in James's words, polish some turds. I won't be calling any songs in the Pearl Jam catalog, or Metallica's for that matter, turds. It's too It's too crude and sophomoric, which is saying something coming from me. But that doesn't mean I don't think there was a little bit of polishing happening on this song. And by that, I mean this. There are some, sorry, Brad's book. There were some ham-fisted guitar effects that kind of cover some awkward empty patches for me. There's a warble effect on Ed singing in the verses. Just a lot of masking on this song, musically speaking. Like they're covering something up. And frankly, there isn't a whole lot happening either. Matt's verse pattern sounds like maybe they've edited out some of the beats, and the lyrics are like 80% the same thing. Tell me why, tell me lies, help me. That's the vast majority of the song. Look it up. So yeah, you're going to have to help me find reasons to care to understand this one at this point. The repetition across this song's 3.5 minutes, it feels more like 6, and that's not good, right? And I think you're one of your few criticisms about Comes and Goes is that it's 6 that feels even longer than that.
Well,
And
could you make the same argument about Daughter? That the repetition. What do you think?
Yeah, but it's short. Well, I guess it's not shorter. There is still more going on, and there are more lyrics.
Okay, that's fair.
It takes until the outro to get some semblance of passion for the theme herein, finally. And there are a couple of decent lines there. Just took too long to come. Those lines being, "The man they call my enemy, I've seen his eyes. He looks just like me, a mirror. The more you read, we've been deceived. Every day it becomes clearer." I mean, the energy is here. It matches the passion and the performance of these lyrics, but they're not so much better than the rest of the song. The bar was that low. So unfortunately, this will be probably one of the lowest rated songs in the catalog you'll ever get from me.
Wow.
I am sub 2, my friend. I'm 1.5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, those lines you just read, the man they call my enemy, I've seen his eyes. He looks just like me. Amir, we've been deceived. In 2002, that was a foreigner. That was somebody that you were told was the enemy. In 2024, we've been told by the incoming president that the enemy is the enemy from within, while a campaign based on hope and unity fell dramatically flat on its face. So Pearl Jam seemed to struggle to reconcile the America that they were living in back in 2002. And many Americans, I think, feel that the United States no longer makes sense to them today. So in many ways, there's a sense of heartbreak in Eddie's vocals in this song that parallels the heartbreak that a lot of people today feel. Mm-hmm. Primarily because so much about this country doesn't make sense anymore. And this idea of the enemy and the reconciliation of the idea that, yes, the enemy does look just like us. And in many ways, we have been deceived. So I think that there is a salient warning in this song. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a premonition, but I think that there's more depth to it, perhaps, than it gets credit for. I won't call it, sonic genius on the part of the band, but I also don't think that it's just a blubbering mess either. I'm going to go 2.5 out of 5.
All right. I would also say that the idea of the enemy being portrayed as someone, I guess, the enemy being portrayed as someone who's different but actually looks like just like me, that's been around for decades. Think of McCarthyism. Think of it's been going on forever. Yeah, that's how division works, and whether or not it works is another story. Let's move on to a song that is, well, it was divisive then. It's kind of irrelevant now. Bush Leaguer. What a confounding song, Paul. Every section's music I actually find quite interesting. The heavy intro section that repeats as a chorus. The kick drum heavy verse with the rustic acoustic guitar on the left and the organ on the right. Even the stuttering, fuzzed out pre-chorus. All of them on their own are very interesting to me. Unique enough without being too far gone. And yet, you put them together and you do not get a cohesive statement. It feels as awkward and Frankensteined as the lyrics are cringy. Some political statements age well, some do not. And that's coming from someone who did not and does not believe that George Bush was a good president. We took a number of paths away from global leadership, in my opinion, with him. And he deserves all the criticism this song is leveraging. But it just doesn't work as a song. It's probably the main reason the band hasn't played it since before Bush left office. So there was an opportunity there to make a statement, somewhat direct, but it was too on the nose and too clunky. So for me, it's a 2 out of 5.
Okay. Look, it's the first time Eddie's spoken word attempts, previously seen on I'm Open and Push Me, Pull Me, are so explicitly directed and critical of one person. Mm-hmm. Will we get, similar anthems of vilification like this moving forward? Or just a few lines here and there like we saw in Gigaton? That remains to be seen. What I will say, though, is this is one of the more forgettable tracks, I think, on the record. So I'm with you, 2 out of 5.
There you go. All right. Short and sweet. Let's move on to Half Full. Now, Ed does a much better job at being clever with his indignation of the elites in this one than on Bush Leaguer. There are some great turns of phrase like these. the obvious one. Don't see some men as half empty, see them half full of shit, thinking that we're all but slaves. There ain't gonna be no middle anymore. It's been said before, the haves be having more, yet still bored. What a verse. I've always loved it.
Very from Porch.
Yeah, I know, right? The little allusion, little reference to Porch. It's very like poetry slam in a coffee shop kind of vibe. Those last couple of lines of the way that they rhyme. And listen, any chance we can get Mike McCready to just lean in to a blues-based solo, we take that, right? I mean, why not? And then you've got a waltz time signature, the old 3/4 time signature. That's a fun wrinkle. Haven't had that on the record. Very cool. And yet there's something missing for me. It's almost a little too simple. You know, the arrangement, the chord patterns. What I love about the song is experiencing it live, because the band leans into its greatest strength of the song, at least I should say, the groove, while Mike is soloing. It's all vibes, and they're emboldened by Ed shining the reflection, you know, off the spotlight, off of his guitar's pickguard across the audience. He's picking people out. It's as if to say, I see you. You too are the ones the haves are stealing from. But that experience is not in the studio recording. Now, it may be harsh to judge a song by what it doesn't have, but here we are. You can't look backward, or you can't unsee it or unhear it or unexperience it. So for me, a really lovely song. Mike McCready, amazing, but there's something missing there. 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I think that's a solid assessment here. Like Ghost, this was played 2 or 3 times before recording. Jeff said they knocked it out in less than an hour. Ed had lyrics in a couple of days. I think many people may find solace in nature right now. That's what Ed says the song's about. So if he's saying this song's about what nature says to us when you spend time in it, I suppose that there's still a lot of meaning and there's still a lot of value and utility in a song like this, even today, for a lot of folks. So I'm with you, though. 3 out of 5.
All right. Let's move on to Arc. This is a beautiful tribute to the 9 lives lost at Roskilde, and a wonderfully unique approach to that point, with Ed layering vocals for a little over a minute. He's clearly passionate, empathetic, and honest. I mean, that's all we ever asked of him, and that's what he excels at. And it's a fitting tribute to the victims of that tragedy, but I don't think it's worthy of a rating. I don't think you can rate this. It's not a song, really.
It's an expression. And an homage.
Exactly.
A eulogy, if you will.
Perfect. It is a eulogy, and I think that it's a beautiful expression of that. But it doesn't feel right to rate it. So, but I am glad that it's on the album. So that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's a beautiful homage, and I'm with you. To rate a eulogy when this was meant to be an expression that honors the young lives that were lost, I think it does the song or the expression, if you will, a disservice. So I'm with you on that.
All right. Time for the final track. All or None.
It's a hopeless situation.
The final track of Riot Act is as heart-wrenching as it is musically complex and interesting. There are so many textures that seemingly swirl around each other, be it acoustic guitar, electric guitar, organ, piano, and of course Jeff's bass and Matt's drums. The opening guitar bit is panned so hard left that you feel a sense of unease immediately, because there's nothing. It's just nothing in the right, and usually there's a little bit of something. So when the rest of the band comes in, it's kind of like you're being yanked into a room you didn't want to be in, And to that point, Stone is playing that intro guitar bit, that acoustic guitar bit. he's playing the back of the beat, meaning he's almost out of time. He's hitting notes at the very end of each bar, and that is by design. Okay, Jeff's bass line seems to be playing tag with Eddie's vocal melody, which is amazing. And Matt goes full jazz with the brushes, and that's a lovely change of pace as well. You mentioned he does it again over there on Thumbing My Way, I believe. Now, Mike's solo is as wide open as his solo is on Garden. You know, when you give Mike space to work, it's something to behold, because he can play into space just as well as he can play inside of a phone booth. I mean, he's just that good. The only song that feels lyrically and musically more congruent on this record is probably Thumbing My Way. The music and lyrics just really match each other.
Well said.
It's a hopeless situation, and I'm starting to believe that this hopeless situation is what I'm trying to achieve. I still try to run on. I still try, but it's all or none. There is something unsettling about Ed holding seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time. A hopeless situation that he wants, but also admitting he's going to try and run on anyway.
Yeah.
Why would he want to achieve hopelessness and yet also make the effort to forge ahead? You said it earlier. Sometimes questions left unanswered are the best questions posed. You know, as humans, we seek resolution. Think about the movies. Always a happy ending, right? Except for Empire Strikes Back. But that was intentional. but that isn't always possible, right? It's not always possible. And maybe this song just celebrates that. Is it truly all or none, though? That's the question you got to answer. And that's, I think, a very, very fitting way to end a very complex record. I've always loved this song. I love it more now than I did then. 4 out of 5.
Any closing thoughts before I jump in?
No.
Okay. All or none. This is a dark finish, I think.
Yes.
And, you know, for some folks who woke up this morning, you know, they might listen to a song like this and say it's arguably a perfect summation of not only where we were in 2002, but now again in 2024. Those lines, it's a hopeless situation. I'm starting to believe that this hopeless situation is what I'm trying to achieve. Again, we did this to ourselves, just like we did 2002 to ourselves. But it's this line that I think stands out. Can we help that our destinations are the ones we've been before? I still try to run on, but it's all or none. That idea that we're going in circles, you know what I mean? I think that's an important concept when viewed within the context of when the album was written and when looked at today. This song and this album is Pearl Jam at their most naked, their most honest, and I'm not, you know, they're not trying to make a statement on this record. They're just reacting rather than responding. And while responding may ultimately prove to be more productive and impactful, an emotive reaction at least offers the unfettered realism and humanity that we all so often struggle to regulate. And it's a departure, if I'm being honest, from the escapism that every other record in the catalog has offered to some degree. It's not surprising, I would argue, that it took Pearl Jam 4 years to release another record after Riot Act. When you're that vulnerable and human, it's an exhausting and emotional toll. But Pearl Jam, I think they try to reclaim their identity on the next album, Avocado. But that record now feels more like an attempt to be themselves again without truly acknowledging or embracing how they had fully changed. Sure, you know, we get proclamations to not taste a life wasted again or kill love for it's the highest sin. But I would say that we're mostly back on brand again with that record, and we're highly self-aware. This record, different. Not sure if Dark Matter is a record that pushes them significantly further or if it represents the pinnacle of their self-awareness. That I don't know yet, but we're lucky to have that record regardless. Riot Act, though, I think for me and this song, All or None, is Pearl Jam finding out what happens when you react instead of respond. And it's arguably the least self-aware that we will ever see them on a record again. That alone, on a lot of levels, makes it a uniquely important addition to the catalog. And I think it's borderline essential listening if your hope is to gain a little more self-awareness of your own through this band's music. So this song for me is a 3.5. And if I had to tally all these up together, we're hovering right around that 3 out of 5 mark, which I think when the album first came out, I found it to be very inaccessible, and I struggled with it. Now I look back at it now, and I listen to it more than I listen to Binaural. I listen to it more than I listen to Avocado. So I think that says something. And I can see myself listening to it quite a bit in the coming weeks, to be honest with you.
Ed talks about on this Dark Matter tour, don't react, respond. Don't react, respond. I disagree, Ed. Sometimes some things are so personal or hit you so deeply and so profoundly that it is impossible or unhealthy to not react. But you cannot not respond. And I feel like the band needed to react to what had happened with Roskilde, with Bush and Gore, with 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq wars, WMDs, the whole shebang. They needed to do that. They needed to get that off of their chest. There's obviously a lot of complex feelings, and I think that's why this record is 15 songs long, 15 tracks long, if you want to count Arc as an expression and not a song, whatever you like. But I think it's necessary, and we didn't. I shouldn't say we didn't. I think a lot of us, me included, did not recognize the necessity for that at the time.
No.
Part of the reason why I realized that it is necessary now is I'm older, right? I have more wisdom, more perspective. A lot of those songs, at least musically, in a bubble, open up. You put them in a Columbus decanter, if I may, and they open up, right? But also, the times, they are not a-changing, unfortunately, for me. I'm speaking for myself, for me. And we'll need to respond. We have to respond. I've come to learn that there are a number of Pearl Jam fans who apparently are very excited right now. Not really sure how you can view the world that way and be a Pearl Jam fan considering the band's political proclivities. But therein lies a fun game of,
that's the universal,
of who are you?
The universal power of music. And he would say music is the universal language. And I think that you can have your own positions, your own views, and listen to Pearl Jam's music and still be affected by it. Just love the way it sounds and love the way it makes you feel, and may not necessarily always agree with the positions that are being articulated lyrically, but nonetheless, the power of their music, I think, extends and transcends, if you will, far beyond political ideology and positions. And
that is the beauty of it, though. That is the beauty of it. Yeah. Is even though I can see that dichotomy and go, how? The fact that it does speaks volumes about the quality of the art. And we can't. Art is subjective, right? And here we are rating them, but there are ratings, and your mileage may vary. And I think that with my age, with my wisdom, and with the current landscape and how I feel about what is happening right now, this record has found itself to be a necessity in my life. And listening to it back in headphones, cranked up to find the little nooks and crannies of all the songs for this review was therapeutic in a lot of ways. And it's going to get spun again. Go bust out the old 180 gram LP, put on the big speakers, blast it. So I think I'm around the same number as you, probably the 3.5, 3 area, which is probably stronger than what I would have given it before. And I think you were probably thinking that I was going to rate it even lower than that, but
I was.
Welcome to perspective, like I said, all these years later, all this context later.
Yeah.
I wonder what you guys think. I am out of scotch, ladies and gentlemen. Well, actually, there's a little guy left there. The Lagavulin, it stings the throat, but it stings so good. And I would love to know what you guys think. This is our second retro review, 10 Now Riot Act, and doing so on its anniversary at a very interesting time. A lot of parallels here. Love to know what you guys think. Tell us in the comments on Instagram, or email us, or DM, or Facebook, wherever you follow us and communicate with us. We'd love to know. And with that, we are at the end of the episode. I want to remind you of a couple of real quick housekeeping bits. Please go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen right now. Donate a few bucks over to the Wounded Warrior Project. They do great stuff for our veterans. They need our help. They do the stuff that we choose not to do. And that's where I'll leave it. And if you spend a few bucks, let's say $5 or more, you'll get stickers and pins from us. And, the greatest donator will get this bad boy, this book from Brad Clausen, which is an absolute treat.
It's a beaut, Clark.
And go ahead and check out last week's episode. I'll link to it in the corner up there somewhere, YouTube. And go ahead and watch it or listen to it. And there you go. If you want to support the show, and this is how we fund it, through Patreon, lovely Discord channel, giveaways, that being this, Stips and Brian Rector's book, I Am No Guide, Pearl Jam Song by Song. That is the November giveaway item. These gentlemen will be on the show next week to talk about this book. That is the giveaway for this month. So if you want to go ahead and help the show out, Patreon is the place to do so. If not, no big deal. The easiest thing to do, the free thing to do, is go ahead and like this video, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell for notifications. But if you're old school, listening only, Paul.
Oh, well, they should rate, review, and subscribe on their preferred podcast platform of choice. You've heard the candidates' platforms. They don't need your vote anymore. We still do, so go ahead and give us that.
Somehow, after all this time, no matter how we're feeling, you find ways to do it again and again in unique ways. In the presence of brilliance sometimes, people?
Oh, you doth give me too much credit.
Thank you for sticking around and hanging out with us for this retro review of Riot Act.
Absolutely.
Again, tell us what you think. Like I said, we'll be back with you next week, talking song by song. Actually, not every single song, just the book and how they made it, with Brandon and Brian Stipp, if you're nasty. Next week on this channel, wherever you listen to us or watch us. So, until then, you're listening or watching
The State of Love and Trust.